Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Glitch and welcome to Game & Lore. Before we get started, I just wanted to say a few things. I want to begin by thanking you all for the overwhelming success of Magalore's Bagalore, our first major video on the channel. It received nearly 3,000 views and Game & Lore itself has hit nearly 300 subs. We couldn't have done it without your support, so we thank you most sincerely. We're glad to see that you're interested in what we have to offer and we hope you continue to stick around. Now, on to the current matter. This video is a little different from Bagalore in multiple ways. We're testing some new stuff and we want to establish early on what to expect on this channel. We've seen too many YouTubers back themselves into a creative corner and being upset when they try something new and it doesn't do as well as other videos from a series or topic that dominates their channel. We don't want this for Game & Lore. Because of this, this will not be a Kirby only channel. That doesn't mean that Kirby won't have a home here. We actually have several Kirby videos planned for the future, but that does mean to expect some stuff other than Kirby. This will also help us from getting burnout on a singular series, since this will give us the opportunity to cover new and varied topics. We're also not exclusively doing lore videos, though the shorts may have made that a little more obvious. I mean, it's called Game & Lore. We gotta get some games in here too, you know? This will include dominantly game reviews with the occasional theory here or there. However, those will probably remain YouTube shorts. Maybe some other things could come along down the road. Who really knows? You're just gonna have to hop on and ride with us to see how it goes.
Hello, and again, welcome to the Aperture Science Computer-Aided Enrichment Center. Your specimen has been processed, and we are now ready to begin the test proper. Before we start, however, keep in mind that although fun and learning are the primary goals of all Enrichment Center activities, serious injuries may occur for your own safety and the safety of others. Wait now, and cake will be served immediately. Thank you for participating in this Aperture Science Computer-Aided Enrichment activity.
Target acquired.
Anyway, with that addressed, today we'll be talking about Portal, a 2007 puzzle platformer by Valve, the studio iconic for never being able to count higher than 2 when it comes to their game series. Portal was developed in the Source engine, home to other classics such as Counter-Strike, Left 4 Dead, and Garry's Mod. It made its debut in the Orange Box, where it was packaged alongside both Half-Life 2 and Team Fortress 2, before receiving a separate release later in 2008. Portal is the result of the efforts of the team at the then Nuclear Monkey Software, whose work on 2005's Narbacular Drop would land them in the line of sight of one Gabe Newell, who proceeded to hire the entire staff to work for Valve on a new game title. Narbacular Drop's gameplay heavily revolves around the idea of placing 2 portals on any non-metallic surfaces throughout a dungeon, a bit more Lord of the Rings fantasy than the eventual Star Trekian sci-fi approach Portal would later take. Narbacular Drop laid a lot of the technological groundwork for Portal, including both its portal system and its physics, allowing for a decently quick development cycle in a little more than 2.5 years, at least by today's game development practices. Following its release in the Orange Box on Steam, Portal would later get re-releases on Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and quite recently in the Portal Companion Collection on Nintendo Switch. However, one must ask if Portal holds up today in the new era of gaming. After all, Portal's nearly 20 years old at this point, yet it, like many other Valve titles, seems almost ageless to players, but why is that? After nabbing the game for myself during the 20th anniversary Steam sale, I decided it was about time to take the plunge and see whether it lives up to its praise or not. With that in mind, I think it's time we take a tour of Aperture Science in Game & Lore's review of Portal. Welcome to Aperture Science, a clear picture of the future. And boy, is clear the right word for it. There's nothing here. Just us and the facility's test chambers that are laid out before us. As early as when we first open our eyes upon exiting the stasis chamber, something feels off. This is, at least to me, one of Portal's most notable qualities, establishing atmosphere, and by proxy, gradual environmental storytelling. By today's standards, most people know what Portal is about, but I imagine back in the day this would have felt super surreal. Aperture Science tells a story, but very little of it is actually done through dialogue. In the beginning, Aperture is presented as pristine but empty. The test facility is clean and almost clinical, and dominated by an entirely white color scheme with very little departure from it except when the tests require the walls to not be Portal compatible. We've talked about the symbolism of white before in Magolor's Bagalore, with white being attributed to purity and cleanliness, something Aperture is more than eager to present itself as. After all, you've just awoken and you're here to run some tests, that's it. There's no greater history here, no underlying secrets. There's no signs of human life at all other than yourself either, weirdly enough. You are alone here, aside from the voice, GLaDOS, that guides you through the 19 tests laid out to be conquered. It feels almost holy, yet so wrong. As you progress through the facility, the divine illusion starts to have its image chipped away at. The tests slowly become more and more dangerous, having started with simply putting weighted storage cubes on heavy-duty super colliding super buttons, before introducing disintegrating high-energy pellets in Test Chamber 6, hazardous water in Chamber 8, and even military-grade turrets in Chamber 16. The trials are becoming even more dangerous, and it's in Chamber 16 that a crack in the illusion finally reveals itself. Halfway through the chamber, you'll stumble upon a broken panel in the facility's walls, which leads into a den of scattered junk and graffiti-covered walls. The music shifts, and looking over the scribbles and writing provides a daunting warning. You are being deceived. Your endgame goal is a farce. The cake is a lie. You find more of these dens as you progress, with more truth being fed to you before you reach the end of the final test chamber. However, the true intentions of the facility rear their ugly head. After narrowly escaping a fiery death, you progress deeper into the facility to look for GLaDOS, and it's apparent that something most evil happened here. The walls are dirty and factory-like. There's tons of heavy machinery pounding away behind the scenes. There's a lot of grit, grime, and waste all over the place now that you've left the test chambers. The pristine appearance of Aperture Science you had initially been greeted by has since been dropped, with the real state of things now being more apparent than ever. It's a huge twist slowly built up throughout your playthrough, and none of this is conveyed to you through dialogue, which I think is incredibly impressive. Sure, GLaDOS says some things here or there, but the bulk is purely through the world around you. After that, we get a glimpse into the facility's history as we reach a corridor where we can see a press conference room with a projector still running that reveals Aperture Science's competition for government grants against... Wait a minute, Black Mesa? Dang it, and I didn't even bring my passport with me. I won't go into any more detail regarding Portal relative to Half-Life, because in all honesty, there isn't much to cover in just Portal alone. Portal takes place between Half-Life 1 and 2, but it's more of a side quest than anything else. I'll have to cover the combined worlds of Portal and Half-Life proper down the road once I get around to playing all of them. Anywho, we get an idea of GLaDOS' history with the company during her boss fight, but this is all spoken dialogue and not inherently passively told to us. Back to the original point, Portal handles its atmosphere and its environmental storytelling incredibly well, arguably better than most games in the present day, and that is what I think is Portal's greatest strength. However, this is a strength that is further enhanced by other aspects, such as its original soundtrack. There's a level of unease that comes from the incredibly pristine yet eerily empty corridors of Aperture Science, which gets greatly enhanced by an equally chilling ambience composed by Mike Muraski and Kelly Bailey. What's interesting to note is that Muraski and Bailey's discographies are entirely comprised of Valve titles, though this is likely in part to how much they contributed to said titles, with Muraski having footing in everything from Counter-Strike 2 to the entirety of TF2 musically, and Bailey being both a concept artist and a programmer for the Half-Life series up until 2011. These two really get to spread their wings in terms of their composing potential in Valve's repertoire, with some of my favorites being Muraski's Intruder Alert from TF2, and Bailey's Apprehension and Evasion from Half-Life 2. In Portal, the two naturally adapt the gloomier dread of Aperture science in musical form. I think the ones that reflect these feelings the best are Bailey's Self-Esteem Fund and Muraski's No Cake for You. Self-Esteem Fun has some incredible melancholy in its melody that really sets the mood because, at least up to a certain point, there's no obvious answer as to why Aperture Science seems to be a shell of itself. It feels empty, and I think the track captures that lack of energy incredibly effectively. Likewise, No Cake for You plays upon first reaching Chamber 16's hideaway, which, if you remember, is when we finally get the hard immersion crack to Aperture's presentation of itself. You can hear voices within the track, and you feel genuine chills as you look over the truth left to you by someone seemingly no longer around. It's rather disturbing, and I think it does a good job of reinforcing the great calamity that occurred here in Aperture prior to the campaign. So far, Portal expertly handles its atmosphere, limited narrative through environmental storytelling, and its music, but what of its gameplay? Surely this hasn't held up as well as its other features, right? Portal's gameplay heavily revolves around the creative use of the Aperture Science handheld portal device, more iconically known as the Portal Gun. You don't actually get the Portal Gun until Chamber 2, but once you get your hands on it, boy is this thing great. Mind you, it's not a complete Portal Gun, you won't get the orange half until Chamber 11, but the game is set up to gradually get you accommodated with its mechanics before that. Pressure plate buttons, blue portals only, energy pellet lock puzzles, basic platforming, momentum physics, a completed portal gun, turrets, the list goes on. It just feels incredibly satisfying to hurl yourself across great lengths with built-up momentum, or skip entire sections in the later stages of the game with clever use of the portal gun. The thing has no limits to its placement range either, so you can fire it from absurdly far and precise lengths to get where you need to go as efficiently and quickly as possible. The sky's the limit with the portal gun, and you'll find that even that's not technically the full capability of this space-shifting sidearm. I will note that the physics can be a little iffy at times, at least when coming in and out of portals. There have been times where using the portal gun in mid-air has been less than manageable with the weird way you'll turn when launching through floor portals, especially in Chamber 18, and similar things happen in other instances, though this may simply be due to the way I had the portals themselves placed and no actual fault to the developers. Aside from that, this is easily some of the best movement I've ever experienced in a 3D title. The portal gun allows for an awesome gameplay mechanic that enhances both Portal's platforming and puzzle-solving features. Now, the game itself makes an active effort to progressively get more challenging and complex with its platforming and its puzzles without the difficulty ever ramping up too steeply, which makes its gameplay all the more rewarding throughout the run as you take baby steps towards the start of the game's endgame, leading to the conclusion of Chamber 19, where the game becomes a true test of the skills the player should have developed. Players should never find themselves to be in over their head when playing Portal. It's a great game for beginners, but it also accommodates more experienced players as well, as there are more challenging options available in the challenge and advanced modes that are unlocked after completing the main campaign for the first time. The advanced mode restructures test chambers 13 through 18 into trickier variants of the main campaign's version of them, forcing players to think outside the box with their fully developed Portal skill set they've picked up over the initial playthrough. Meanwhile, Challenge Mode offers 18 unique challenges where you go for gold by rerunning through the vanilla versions of Chambers 13 through 18 while using the least amount of portals, taking the least amount of steps, and doing it in the least amount of time. Needless to say, these gold medals are some of the hardest challenges to overcome in Aperture Science, requiring insane abuse of Portal's gameplay, hitboxes, and other aspects to achieve. The least amount of steps challenges are giving me the most problems for sure as of the time of writing this. I personally found the least amount of portals category to be the easiest of the three in challenge mode, but it's still no pushover. There's also a few bonus achievements that are unlockable by going the extra mile in the main campaign, such as jumping 300 feet in a single bound, falling 30,000 feet in one jump, knocking over a turret with another turret, and two far more time-consuming challenges, transmission received and camera shy. Aside from your challenge mode and advanced mode achievements, these two require the most effort of the vanilla campaign achievements. Transmission received requires you to carry the 26 radios spread throughout the game to set locations. Some of them are tricky to even find, much less get to the location you need to take them, but the game does let you know if you've completed one or not by having the light on the radio turn from red to green forever from there on out, so if you miss one, you can always come back and check which ones you're missing. Camera Shy, however, is not nearly as forgiving, requiring you to destroy all 33 surveillance cameras in a single run. There's no easy way to go about this, and it's really easy to forget where the cameras are while just running through the game again. This one is hands down my least favorite achievement to go for, especially since it resets every time you start a new game or load a save. It's so satisfying to complete though, so I can't be too critical of it, even if the challenge itself is very tedious. This brings up another issue I have with the game, which is that it's broken up into chapters, yet these chapters are seemingly random in terms of checkpoint. I mean, they barely even count as chapters. You can't go for Camera Shy until you reach the second test chamber, which means you have to start all the way from the beginning of the game again, because the only checkpoint that lets you get there at all from the chapter selection is at the start. It's a bit inconvenient, but if you aren't achievement hunting, I suppose it isn't that big of a deal. These chambers go by really quickly anyway. With that out of the way, while game difficulty has always been subjective and, more importantly, extremely controversial in the game review scene, I would say that most people will find this game to be on the easier side, though to me, this isn't really a criticism. It's got features that accommodate tougher players, so a casual playthrough isn't too demanding, and the extra modes feel more like epilogue content to those who are willing to go beyond the game's main content. I think it's a good compromise for players of all levels. The game itself isn't really that long either, which I think is another pro for first-time players. The game is roughly 3 to 4 hours in a casual playthrough, and you can get a lot more time out of it. I have roughly 15 to 16 hours clocked into the game already, and that was just in preparation for this video on top of just a vanilla playthrough. I've pretty much played it about 4 times over at this point. It's really enjoyable, and because it's not so long, it's pretty easy to get lost in the gameplay loop of Portal every now and again. Although not referred to by name during the playthrough, you play as Chell, Aperture Science's most stubborn and determined test subject, who is pursuing the trials ahead in the name of moist, chocolatey, cakey goodness. Meanwhile, the voice on the intercom belongs to the genetic lifeform and disk operating system, more iconically recognized as GLaDOS, who we very briefly mentioned earlier in the review. GLaDOS is voiced by the lovely Ellen McLain, who you may recognize as the announcer from Team Fortress 2. She also voices the Overwatch from Half-Life, which really solidifies her role as omniscient yet absent announcers in Valve titles. Ellen brings a lot to the table for GLaDOS and is a huge part of the character's appeal, able to give the character everything from crude sarcasm to endearing charisma, despite the lack of visuals from the character throughout the entirety of the game. Words really have power when it comes to Portal, and McLain's performance shines brightly, especially in GLaDOS' end credits song, Still Alive. This credits song is beautiful because even though it's just GLaDOS talking about notes and stuff, it really gets a feel for her personality, joking about the incompetence of Black Mesa, still teasing about a yummy cake that doesn't exist, and overall just recalling what happened during the campaign. It's very endearing, and McLain really breathes life into the machine and will go on to become a vital part to the iconic antagonist's popularity. With that being said, Chell and GLaDOS' relationship is a pivotal part to the Portal experience, with Chell being the quick-to-act silent type that complements GLaDOS' physically absent yet omnipresent dialogue that rings throughout the facility. This dynamic, even through the later stages of the game, fills the void in the otherwise dystopian atmosphere that Portal throws you into, which I think is an effective way to connect the player to GLaDOS. She's the only comfort for the player in the clinical halls of the test facility, so it makes that established connection all the more apparent when GLaDOS ultimately betrays you at the end of Chamber 19. Actually, what's up with this channel and betrayers, by the way? First Magolor, now GLaDOS, what next? Anyway, we also understand a little bit about GLaDOS' history in the game through her dialogue, so she's not a total mystery before everything's said and done, such as how she went AWOL upon activation and flooded the test facility with deadly neurotoxin before getting a morality core installed in order to stop her from doing that. GLaDOS has a long-standing history with Aperture and is the very reason for the facility being the way it is now. Her existence is crucial to everything that makes Portal Portal. The same can't be said for Chell, however, who lifts GLaDOS' appeal at the cost of her own. Anything there is to know about Chell isn't expanded upon until the comics and Portal 2, and even then, she doesn't have much going for her, though Chell is left as a bit of a blank slate, so the player can view the relationship between Chell and GLaDOS as if it's a relationship between themselves and GLaDOS. Any character that Chell may have is virtually non-existent in order to enhance the experience. There's not many instances where the villain is more iconic than the hero in gaming, but GLaDOS is one of the shining exceptions to this, especially following her redesign and role in the sequel. That's not meant to discredit Chell, mind you. She has her own appeal as one of gaming's most iconic female protagonists, up there with the likes of Metroid's Samus Aran and Tomb Raider's Lara Croft, though Chell is definitely the least established and fleshed out of them, though this may be in part by the fact that there are very few Portal games and Chell just hasn't had a lot of time in the gaming scene. Overall, both characters are certainly worthy of their iconic gaming status in the shared debut title, regardless. Now, the final verdict. I know this is what you've all been waiting for, so I'll do a quick recap. Portal has many positive qualities, including a tone-setting atmosphere enhanced by its original soundtrack, subtle world building through environmental storytelling, an engaging gameplay loop, and various challenges for players of all skill levels. There's the occasional hiccups, such as how wonky the camera can get sometimes, coming in and out of portals, and some tedious extra challenges here and there, but ultimately, Portal's still in its prime almost 20 years later. It would go on to receive an incredibly expanded sequel title in 2011, as well as an honorary third title through its crossover with LEGO in LEGO Dimensions. While we wait for a new, proper entry in the franchise, you can get Portal on Steam for $10, although it's commonly on sale for as low as $1, so I would say that this is absolutely the best place that you can get your hands on this game. You can also get it on current-gen consoles through the somewhat recently released Portal Companion Collection on the Nintendo Switch for $20, where it comes packaged with its sequel Portal 2 at full price, but comes with the leisure of being playable on the go. Regardless of your playstyle, I highly enjoyed playing through Aperture Science's puzzling test, so taking everything into account, I'd say Portal is a game I would recommend to anyone. It's a classic, and I think you'd be missing out if you didn't give it a try. Before I go, I want to give a special thanks to Astronomic once again for their work, this time on these PNG Tuber sprites for our second mascot on the channel, Gam. They look phenomenal and he's just so expressive. Thanks, Astro. That's all for now, but stay tuned. There's so much in store here at Game & Lore.